So I'd like to talk a little bit about the situation in Egypt, and first I'd like to say that I completely support the citizens of Egypt who are trying to overthrow President Mubarak. President Mubarak has been the president for too long, and he is a dictator. I would also like to talk about how the situation in Egypt has been reported and distorted here in America by the American media. So as I've been watching TV and watching the situation in Egypt unfold, I've heard several reporters in the American media say things that kind of sounded wrong to me. I've heard a lot about police brutality in Egypt. I've heard about citizens being illegally searched, subjected to police brutality, falsely imprisoned, and brought up on false charges. And then recently I heard in the media, while reporting about the situation in Egypt, I heard a reporter say that 20,000 criminals had escaped from a jail. This reporter described how the criminal element was now involved in the protests in Egypt. And I would like to say, how many of these criminals are actually criminals in a country with massive corruption, with a dictator, with police brutality, where citizens are brought up on false charges? And we also must consider what might be a crime in other countries. In some countries, it's a crime to wear the wrong clothing. In some countries, it's a crime to speak out against the government. In some countries, it's a crime to even have the wrong opinion or the wrong beliefs. And the truth is, when you're talking about a country that's a dictatorship, you can't really guarantee that any supposed criminal has had a fair trial at all. So I would like to say, how many of these thousands of escaped criminals really are criminals? I believe that every single supposed criminal who was arrested, tried, and jailed under this dictatorship deserves a new trial. And I would like to say that all cases of police brutality should be investigated as crimes. The next thing I heard in the news that sounded wrong to me was that President Obama had described Egypt's President Mubarak as a friend of America. And I would like to say that a dictator who oppresses his people should not be considered to be a friend of America. For the US President to call a dictator of a foreign country a friend of America goes against the morals in the US Constitution and the US Bill of Rights. A dictator is by definition a moral enemy of America. And furthermore, dictators in the Middle East are a leading cause of terrorism because they drive their people to extremes. But how can we as Americans expect our government to stand up against dictators in other countries? How can we expect our government to stand up against police brutality, governmental corruption, and loss of civil rights in other countries when we have police brutality in America? We have government corruption in America. We have a loss of civil rights in America as well. And until our government stands up against the loss of civil rights that's currently going on in America, how can we expect them to stand up against civil rights abuses in other countries? And as somebody who's personally been the victim of police brutality, I would like to take this opportunity to speak out against police brutality and dictatorships around the world. What many people in the Middle East don't know is that when the war in Iraq started, thousands of Americans took to the streets to protest the war in Iraq, and thousands of them were beaten by the police or falsely arrested. Because in some countries, they don't show protests on TV because the media is controlled by the government. I also pray that President Mubarak will not use the military to kill the citizens who are protesting with every right to protest, like the Chinese did in Tiananmen Square when they ran over the protesters. I pray that President Mubarak is not so brutal. I pray that he will not use the military to oppress his people. I would like to finish by saying that I completely support the citizens of Egypt in their attempt to overthrow President Mubarak, the dictator. He has been the president for way too long, and it is time for him to step down.